So, welcome to the Covent Garden Inner Space Talk. Our speaker tonight, or the speaker that we were originally going to have, unfortunately has had to go into hospital and is unable to do the talk. And it was all rather last minute. And so we have to really congratulate Sona to taking a leap and saying, yeah, I'll do the talk. I'll deliver for everyone. So just to acknowledge that Gail will not be able to join us due to last minute health issues, but we're very, very fortunate to have Sona joining us today. So welcome to the talk, and the talk is Feng Shui Your Life. We all need living and working spaces that have good vibes. Spaces with good vibes can generate good health, happiness, peace, prosperity. Our environment influences how we think, feel, even how we show up in the world. Discovering an ancient practice like Feng Shui, understanding how to improve the flow of positive energy and harmonize your space with your life. That's quite something. So we've invited our speaker to share her insights on how to explore and add Feng Shui to our life. Sona teaches meditation in Abu Dhabi to both individuals and in organizations. She's trained as a professional translator and interpreter as she speaks 7 languages. Sona's going to be sharing her insights this evening for the next 40 minutes or so. And after that, she's going to do a very short meditation. The idea of the meditation reflection is to take some of the ideas that you've heard and allow them to kind of sink into your heart so that they become something you can start practicing almost immediately. After that, she's going to take your questions. So please send in your questions via the question and answer link or via the chat, and it'll be my pleasure to put those questions to Sona on your behalf. Sona, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Arti, and it's lovely to be with everyone online. And yes, it is a topic that is not something that I would have explored or researched had it not been for Arti's invitation. But as life is, sometimes you need to be pushed into doing something new. And so it's been my pleasure actually to be a researcher of what Feng Shui means and also the effects of using the principles of Feng Shui in my life. And of course, for me, whenever I read something to do with the external world, there's always a mirror in terms of how the external correlates to my inner world. And as a meditator for many years, the inner world has become a place that it's a playground that I love to go to. So let's talk about Feng Shui and what we know about it. As lay people, I'm certainly not a master of Feng Shui as Gail is. And then let's see how that external shift that we can make, understanding Feng Shui could perhaps, it's a choice of course, affect my own internal layout. So my research tells me that Feng Shui actually means wind, water. Now that in itself is a huge statement. Wind, water. To me, water has always symbolized emotions. You know, even in the zodiac signs, they say the water signs are the more emotional type people. And so wind and this is going back to my heritage Indian understanding, wind is associated with your thoughts. Wind is often one of the elements that the body needs, air, but too much wind in your body, in your bones, can actually affect your thinking and create headaches. Wind, water. For me, wind, water somehow represented the inner thoughts, the mind, which is actually quite hidden. Only I know what's happening in my mind. But what is not hidden, and that what is absolutely obvious to everyone, is the effect of the mind on my emotions. So this connection between subtle and gross, between inner and outer, wind, water, was an interesting thing that stood out for me. And secondly, the whole practice in Feng Shui of rearranging things within a space to create better energy flow or better harmonizing, a better harmony effect was also interesting. Because if my thoughts and my feelings get reorganized within, they do definitely create a better flow of inner energy and more harmony and a state of peace. So in Chinese philosophy, they call this energy qi. The same qi used in Qigong, Tai Chi. I think, we often talk of the meridian lines, the energy lines, the qi lines in the body. And if everything in my life is harmonized and balanced, then in Chinese, they would say the qi is flowing. It's the life force, the energy force is flowing. And there are certain aspects that I need to look at to allow this qi to flow in Feng Shui, to create a balance in my life. So the other thing that I remembered as I was doing my research was that in the Indian tradition as well, there is something similar to Feng Shui. It's called Vastu Vidya or Vastu Shastra, which literally means the science of a dwelling, the science of a space. And this is also interesting, isn't it? How to take a space and to know how to arrange it to get the best energy flow and the best outcome, the best sense of comfort, but also to align it with all sorts of other energies around it so that everything harmonizes, not just what's in the space, but what's out of the space as well, is important. And again, made me think it's not just about me. It's not just about my inner space. It's about my inner space and therefore the relationship I have with the outer spaces. Maybe people, maybe objects, maybe just environment around me. So the core meaning of Feng Shui, three main words. One is harmony, the balance and the positive flow between spaces, and therefore the people who live in those spaces. So the first word was harmony. The second word was energy or qi, whereby if there is a well-designed space, then energy flows through that space in the best possible way. And the third obvious words for Feng Shui were wind, water. Again, the invisible energy and the more tangible energy. So there's the wind, the invisible, and the water, the tangible. The two forces that literally shape our entire life. What's happening in the background, and then the effect in the foreground, maintaining a balance between those two. And perhaps when I say balance, it's more about, are the two aligned? Is the inner and the outer completely aligned? So the key principles of Feng Shui, the first principle is the concept that energy should flow smoothly at the right pace, neither too fast, nor should energy stagnate. If energy is too fast, it's a little bit like wind going through a corridor. You know, you might have a hallway at home or anything shaped as a corridor. And, you know, how could that best be arranged to avoid anybody sort of running down that corridor, or children skating up and down? And the other side is where you have little or no movement, which is where you have clutter, you know, or perhaps you have too much stuff, too many objects in a space that is little. So is the energy flowing at a steady pace throughout the whole house or the area that you're looking to feng shui? And for me, the minute I looked at that principle, I guess I internalized it. And I thought, well, are there spaces within me, within my mind and my subconscious mind? Is there programming within me that makes me move too fast, makes my mind perhaps run, get out of control? Are there spaces within me where, if triggered, then that space gets too active? Because we need our mind and we need to think, we need to feel, but overthinking, stressful thinking, nervous thinking, anxious thinking, all of this is very dangerous to my own inner state of well-being. You know, so is there anywhere within that is a bit like a hallway where, you know, this thoughts pass through too quickly? At the same time, are there areas of my life where there's resistance? You know, I don't want to think about that. I just want to shelve it. And I've been shelving the decision for a long time, and it's having an impact on my growth. It's having an impact on the chi, the energy flow within me. And usually wherever there's a blockage, whether it's in your body, in your mind, and, you know, in the space around you, it creates a stagnation in your moving forward, in your growth. So the first principle of Feng Shui that I understood was maintaining a steady qi throughout the whole space. The second principle of Feng Shui was the yin and the yang. Now, these are words that are used quite commonly. And we understand them to be, usually we understand it to be feminine and masculine, you know, but actually yin yang can represent any two opposing forces. So yin yang is really about creating balance. Again, could be masculine, feminine, dark, light, passive, active, all sorts of words that can be used to create an inner state of equilibrium. On the external, perhaps it looks like not having things that are, you know, too boxy everywhere. but to soften them with a vase that has a bit more curvature or shape. Or, you might want to bring in some light. Even if a room has, the feeling, like some old libraries, you want them to have that dark wood look that, it's a very typical library look. But it doesn't mean that it can't have light streaming through during the day from a window well placed. And so you can have the more lit look for some hours of the day and perhaps a darker look for reading in the morning or evening time. Again, maintaining a balance. With colors, again, making sure that not every room in the house is decorated with cushions and curtains and furniture that is dark. But if you've got dark furniture, then maybe lighter colored cushions. And when I thought about my mind, how do I feng shui my mind, which means bringing that principle into my thinking and feeling. It's perhaps one of the goals of spirituality, of leading a spiritual life, to create complete balance within myself. And all of us are born with tendencies that perhaps put us off balance. For example, some people are born with more feminine qualities. It doesn't matter whether you're male or female body, but the qualities are gentle. They're of care and compassion and kindness. Some people are born more with determination and more of a mind that is a planner. So I know we talk about having a life partner, and I'm sure many of you do have friends or a spouse or somebody who is a good balancer for you. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful. However, the ultimate aim in spirituality is for me to create that inner balance within me. Why? Because the inner balance within me creates a balance in everything that I do. So if my space at home is balanced, if I've created a space where it's not just one energy, but it's both sides, then that also brings a sense of equilibrium and harmony. And sometimes we don't even realize that our spaces are a bit lopsided or tilted in energy. And this is where if you bring in somebody who has a different personality to you and you say, oh, if you look at the space, what would you do to balance it out? They'll probably come up with certain ideas or some suggestions that might be new for you, but worthwhile hearing, because as is the inner, so will be the outer. And as is our lack of equilibrium inside, which is normal for all of us, because we're not perfect yet, so will be the way that I place things around me. It's interesting, I was talking to a friend recently, and she's the same zodiac sign or has the same personality as a family member of mine. So I naturally said, oh, this is what they're like. And she just turned around to me and said, yes, and so necessary for you in your life. And I said, really? She said, absolutely. You're a solid, steady, grounded person. But what you also need in your life is a little bit of lift. Someone to encourage you to do things that are out of the box, that are new, and that keep things moving in your life. You don't want too much movement, but Sona, you don't want to stay too grounded either. And I really appreciated that comment, because now that I think about it, I really appreciate having people in my life who are innovators, different to the kind of innovation that I might do. And they help me to see growth, not just personally, but also in inner space and what we could do differently. But I guess you have to have the courage to embrace that growth, don't you? And to allow those sorts of people in your life, to allow spaces and your environment to change. Sometimes in a way that is a little bit uncomfortable to start off with. Okay, so let's move to the third principle of Feng Shui, which is actually using interacting energies through colors and shapes to create balance, even materials. So you may have a smooth fabric, and on top of it, you put a rough fabric, again, like a sofa cover, sofa fabric with a very rough kind of cushion cover to create a little bit of a difference. And that is specifically where things are interacting, where two things are placed close to each other. So you bring in two opposing energies, and yet put together, they create some kind of harmony within themselves. And of course, in Feng Shui, there is a specific use for water. So indoor water features, little fountains, wooden pieces of, architecture in the house itself, or it could be the beams, or it could be just wooden objects placed in different parts of the room. The use of metal, another interesting one. Metal has its own energy. The use of earth, clay objects within the house, that again give a different feeling to metal, don't they? Earth is more grounded. It's softer on the eyes, softer on when light hits it and what it does to the light. Whereas metal often can bounce light in different directions. So even fire, if you were to put a fireplace in a room, or you're looking at where you might want to put the hob, the cooking hob in the kitchen, where would that be placed best? And if we do place things in the right space and these energies interact accurately, it's another form of balance. Again, within me, the balance between the thoughts that are connected with water, the thoughts that are based on an emotional response, different to a metallic response, metallic thoughts, different to grounding thoughts, and therefore grounding behavior. And everything needs to be used together. We're not separating these items, but we're trying to see how they could be placed in such a way that they behave well together. One flows on from the other. The other area of Feng Shui is a map that they use, in which, a bit like a pie diagram, they create an octagonal map that is divided up to symbolize the different aspects of my life, of well-being. So, for example, your health, your wealth, your relationships, nature, the environment, the natural environment around you. So you look at the different aspects of your life and how you would divide up the space that you are looking to Feng Shui, so that each part of that space carries the imprint of well-being in these 8 different areas. And it's so important to cater to all the areas. some of us look at the space that we live in as a place of rest. For some people, their home or their workspace, as the name suggests, is just for work. And so you might create a workspace that only takes into consideration career, but not your health, not the well-being for your eyes to see nature. Could your desk be positioned differently so that you have nature within your area, your view? Even if you have to turn your face in a particular direction, do you see greenery? Do you see flowers? And if you can't, then can you create some greenery? If you pot plants or flowers or just anything around you to give you that sense of it's not just about work only, but there's beauty in the space. So it's a different form of balance, but it's actually making sure that there's a little bit of everything, really, that everything is catered for in your life. And when I come to the inner space of my mind and my inner well-being, again, I think my life is not just for one relationship or one purpose. As my swimming has taught me in the last few weeks, it's not just about looking after the body, but I've got to give my mind a break. I really have to find that space where I can be with myself without anyone disturbing me, where I can be with nature. Water, the effect of water on the body. It's like, when you have a really good shower and you needed that shower. Water cleanses. Water has such an effect of removing energy that is built up, that is stagnant or negative, which is why in many faiths as well, there is an element of bathing, or dipping in water to cleanse. So my swimming has really taught me to appreciate the effect of water flowing on my body, more than just a 3-minute shower. And so water running, as a little water feature in the house, the effect of that as well. It creates a different energy. And am I making sure that my inner map, the way I arrange my thoughts, my inner space, is catering to everything in my life? Am I giving time for the relationship with myself and the divine, time for my close relationships, my friends, my family? Am I giving time for abundance and to feel that inner abundance, the fullness of the soul and the inner being, the well-being, the health? So yes, it's about dividing up space, inner or outer, and making sure that every area that I've divided, the space into is given enough energy, enough time, enough attention to grow. And the fifth area of Feng Shui is actually when you place major objects in a particular point where they are aligned in such a way that they're not clashing with entrances and exits. So things are visible, but the alignment is correct. And it might be that, you don't want to put a chair or a couch, a sofa aligned with your front door, but you can see the front door from where you're sitting. So it's all about viewpoint. It's about alignment, placement, and view. Because in the right spot, it brings power back to me. And when there's power within, there's a sense of security. There's a sense of control. Control here meaning not that I need to micro control everything and everyone, but I feel like I have enough inner strength to manage my life. And so I'm thinking it's so similar, isn't it, to what meditation does? Meditation helps me to position myself in a place where I feel safe, where I feel like, not that I'm in control of everything and I have to exert that control on others, no, but I have a sense of having enough inner power, inner strength to be able to manage life appropriately. So in that sense, I feel in control. And so there are some thoughts, some feelings, some habits, some programming inside me that needs to be in the right position. You know, the knobs need to be set right for me to be able to function in a secure, comfortable way. So these were actually the main sort of principles, the guiding principles of Feng Shui on the outside, but then the guiding Feng Shui principles for my inner Feng Shui, which ultimately ends up Feng Shuiing my whole life. If I can get my inner space sorted and my outer space sorted, then I'm doing well. So 3 very simple tips to start Feng Shui your life, your home, your space. So the first is to declutter. Unfortunately, many of us have this habit of hoarding. It's hard to let go, isn't it? When you've had something that you value for so long, but it's falling apart. It's really hard for some of us to throw things away and to say, honestly, it's not adding any value to my life. If it is, please keep it. But to be able to create appropriate space, so important. This allows chi to flow. This allows energy to flow evenly, easily. And I must admit, I'm a good declutterer when it comes to my inner space. I'm very good at letting go of thoughts and feelings from the day, from the week, from my life generally, from my whole story, that I know are not serving me at all. To the point where I think I've become a bit forgetful. And this is not about my age at all. But I can say that I've let go of things so much, especially negative moments, that if somebody reminds me of it, many times I actually respond saying, really? Did that happen? Gosh, that was so long ago, I've forgotten it. And I don't need to remember those things. They're over, they're done, they're dusted, they serve me for nothing. So that's why it's best to let them go. I can't even learn more from them. I've extracted all the learning that I needed. So declutter. The second is really to consider how you can balance or rebalance the elements within your physical space. And it might be to do with shifting objects around. Maybe it's about colors. Rebalancing out the colors might be about textures, whatever. As a child, I grew up in Italy, and we had neighbors, Italian neighbors, who were absolutely wonderful, wonderful people. And every year, my friend's mum would change their living room around. And this would fascinate me because she did it as a practice, a regular practice, a yearly practice. And you just never knew what new ideas she would have. I actually think she spent the whole year thinking about what she was going to do next year to make things look different. But there was such a freshness in what she did. And I knew when I walked in for the first time and she'd just moved everything around, it was like, oh, this is a bit strange. This is not what I'm used to. But I would always marvel at how she found a new placement for things, really, which leads into the next thing that you can do. Just jumble things around a little bit in your head and in your spaces outside. Don't always do what you've always done. Try to live a little bit out of the box. Place things where you never thought you could place them and create any sense of utility. And just see how it makes you feel. And if you can't, get someone in to help you do it. Because often another pair of eyes, another pair of hands can actually create so much newness. And I really am a believer that if physical things move outside, it stimulates inner movement. And those two things put together, well, you create a completely different focus in your life, a different way of moving forward. And the last thing that you can do is to let in light, let in air. Think about ways of letting nature into your space a little bit more than what it is already. I recently also decided to add extra plants into my own living space. So I've doubled the amount of greenery inside the house, and it feels great. It really feels so healthy. And there's a sort of a peace that's come with that greenery. So I've been asking myself, how can I create a little bit more inner greenery in my own mind? How can I let in some more of nature? And sometimes it's about perhaps changing the kind of curtains you have. If there's thick curtains, try to use thinner curtains or have 2 layers so that more light can come in. Perhaps it's about opening windows, letting fresh air in. Perhaps it's about, as I said, bringing in more live pot plants, flowers, anything that gives a sense of real living energy, closeness to nature, coming back to my natural nature, person who I really am. So these are some of the perhaps benefits that I've researched. And I've even been speaking to a few friends of mine who use principles of Feng Shui regularly to create new spaces in their life. And I, of course, being the meditator that I am, I was really reflecting at how the external and the internal are so deeply connected. You can't move one without the other moving. And sometimes if you feel stuck in your mind, and you just don't know what to do, can't make a decision, can't move forward, can't move backwards, maybe moving things around physically might help to stimulate some inner growth. So I'm going to end there and perhaps take you into a little meditation, if I may. Just a few reflective thoughts on what's been said and how you might be able to use that in your own life. So please find a comfortable position for your body. And just be very aware, very attentive to your physical space, the space that you're sitting in. Just pay that little bit of attention to the things that you may not have noticed. And as I sit here, aware of my surroundings, I ask myself, do I feel the flow of energy, the flow of chi in my life? Do I feel the movement of positivity, of goodness, of growth? Is there anywhere that feels a bit stuck in my life? Are there any decisions that need to be made? That I know that I am avoiding, procrastinating? Are there any blocks? Blockages like barriers that separate me from others. Maybe even separate me from myself. And finally, do I feel a sense of harmony in my relationships? Is the give and take of energy smooth and easy? Is there a flow of energy? And now reflecting on the space that I live in or work in, I ask myself, is there a correlation between my inner world, my inner space, and the physical home, dwelling, or space that I'm surrounded by? What can I do to improve the chi, the energy flow? What could I shift to remove any blockages? What could I add to bring in some newness, some color, something fresh? And what can I let go of to allow space for something new to grow? Just take a deep breath in and let it out. And reflect gently on that connection between the inner and outer worlds that you live in. Thank you.
Thank you. That kind of brought me back to earth and grounded me, but also opened up a whole creative flow for me. Very, very interesting. So I got a bit of earth and fire alongside the water that and wind you were talking about earlier. It's so interconnected, isn't it? You don't have to overemphasize anything. It will automatically adjust if you keep an open mind, I'm guessing. That was incredible. Thank you. Now, there are a few questions that have come in, so let's start. This talk was theoretically challenging in a healthy way. Thank you so much. Do you have any practical examples of managing the flow of energy within when you simply cannot enjoy relationships with those who matter the most to us? I'm thinking about a toxic relationship with my parent and the absence of another.
Well, 2024 was a really hard year for me. One of my closest relationships completely broke down. And you know, when there's a complete lack of communication, the breakdown just speeds up exponentially. And it was tough. It was very hard because I didn't want this mess to continue, but I just didn't know how to repair it. And it was hard for the other person as well. And so I think the big question for me was, what do I do? And at some point around mid-year, I realized if I want to repair this, if I want to allow this relationship to grow in my life, I'm going to have to shift something within me. And it's going to have to be a shift that brings in a lot more understanding and compassion for the other. And my forte is communication. And so it's so easy for me to point the finger at someone else and say, well, you're no good at communicating. But that doesn't solve the problem. So when I realized that the other side was trying to communicate, I like just trying a tiny little bit, I sort of took it upon myself to say, Sona, humility, love, care, and really just wanting things to be okay, give you the option to either carry on or to shift something inside and reach out as well. So I think anything that's difficult in life is actually just pointing us in a direction where shift is required, movement is required within me. As Mike George writes, what's in the way is the way. The toxicity only comes up because it's asking to be cleansed. It's asking to be healed. But it's I, the inner self, who must want to heal and cleanse. I don't know if that answer's made much sense to you, but it really came from my own experience in the last 12 months.
I absolutely hear what you're saying. I'm just wondering, what did you do to shift within you? Or how did you bring back the inner balance that comes with all the four elements of Feng Shui? How did you rebalance that for yourself?
I think the first thing is I realized that energy flow was necessary. When you block communication, you basically block any form of understanding. So I had to sort of reopen the channels of communication. And finally, it was one-on-one, but I used other people to get a few messages through, which was helpful to a point. But the other thing is, I realized that for harmony, I couldn't have it all my way. I was going to have to be a little bit more flexible and see the situation from the other person's perspective as well. I also realized that stagnation doesn't work beyond a point. You can put things aside and say, well, I'm just going to leave them there for now. But that blocked energy ultimately has to be sorted out. So, I look at some of those principles of Feng Shui and I probably used them. I used the energy flow, the qi, getting the qi going again. I definitely had to deal with the blockages within me and my way of thinking. I had to make sure also that, there weren't those spaces where I overthink things and thoughts just start to race, because that doesn't help me see clearly and take peaceful decisions. So yeah, that's all the principles we used, I think.
How do you bring compassion and patience into this whole process? Because I can't imagine when something is that important that you can do it in a blink of an eye, so to speak. And have patience without leaving a block. Have compassion, but still have that force of moving forward. Force or momentum, that's the right word. The momentum to move forward.
Well, it took me 9 months. It took me 9 months to realize what I needed to do or how I needed to be. I think for me, every test that's come in my life has come to make me a lot more compassionate. As a bottom line, that's how I would see my spiritual or inner growth. And so on the one hand, compassion for myself, because otherwise I'd beat myself up and say, look, you've made such a mess of this. Couldn't you have handled it better 9 months ago? But then compassion for the other person as well, who, like myself, is growing and is learning. And it's normal. It's very normal to make mistakes. And it's okay, totally okay to mess things up. So for me, compassion is about not blaming, not shaming, not, right and wronging things. But at the same time, realizing that if we want to get back to a place of harmony, then something needs to move inside me. It's not just the compassion. Compassion has to come into motion, which often means, as I said, speaking, communicating, and putting deadlines to decisions, just keep shelving things and say, okay, well, can we decide together by when we make certain decisions? And then, to top it all off, I think I just decided that I don't want to go back into that dark space again. So I'm going to do anything possible to create change, to try something new, because the old way didn't work. The old me wasn't holding it all together very well.
Thank you. Here's a question for you. How do you declutter the space in your mind?
Well, I guess the first thing is to recognize where there is clutter. And here by clutter, I guess I refer to lots of stored memories of the past that are weighing me down. They're just taking up space. And there are nice memories that I want to keep. But if it's memories that actually affect that inner programming, that ultimately affects my responses, my reactions, which ultimately affects the quality of my life, then do I want to give my limited space to those old memories? So recognizing what the clutter is, I think, is the first step. And secondly, realizing that it's me who's holding on to the clutter. The clutter is not sticking to me. And so the one who has to let go is me. And whenever I've asked myself, why are you holding on to this negative memory, it usually comes back to a sense of perhaps I'm a victim, poor me, you did so much wrong to me. Again, the judgmental me that wants to feel like you were wrong and I'm right. But that doesn't help either, because that negative outlook towards someone doesn't heal me or the relationship. So why should I let go? If I'm very clear that I don't want the clutter, it's easy to let go. But if you want to declutter and at the same time you also want to hang on because it makes you feel good, then it's hard to declutter. So first, identify what you're decluttering. Secondly, ask yourself, why should you let go? What's the benefit for you? And thirdly, the shift in the way you see the memory. That nothing is right or wrong. It is what it is. It's happened. You can't change it. Do you want that effect to remain? Or would you like to create some space for something new to come in? And if the answer is no, I want something new, then, well, just let it go. Forgive, forget.
Okay, this is going to be the last question. There are quite a few others, but this is going to be our last question. When your outer world is fully cluttered, overcluttered, and your inner world is overcluttered, where do you start? Both areas are challenging.
I would start with the outer. And if you have a friend or someone who can help you, it's great. I did that a few months ago, actually 3 or 4 months ago. I just got a really good friend of mine in, and I said, right, there's this whole shelf I've got with all sort of bits and pieces that are to do with workshops, resources, books. I mean, it was just such a clutter, the whole space. And I said, what would you do with the space? And I watched as she reorganized the whole thing. And of course, she consulted me a few times, not as many times as I wish she had, but a few times my heart would sort of sink when she threw away something that had a bit of meaning for me. But I realized, honestly, I haven't used this for a decade. So what is the point keeping it? So if you have a friend who can come in and help you, you need a lot of courage. Let them come in, because they can ask those really tough questions like, when did you last use this? Or, how come you've got 5 of these things? Do you really need to have 5 pairs of scissors in the same drawer? And it's only when someone can point out those things to you that sometimes you realize, what have I been doing? Hoarding. So start with the outside. As you clear the outside, you start to feel lighter. As the clutter, slowly leaving the room, there's such a sense of openness and space and lightness, as I said, that fills the inside. And I think it actually starts a natural process of wanting to let go internally. That would be my advice.
I like it. Start something small and it will have a bigger impact at the end. So thank you. It's been fantastic having you. There have been so many thank yous. You have touched so many hearts, but you've also sowed lots of seeds. People are commenting on what they're walking away with and new insights that they hadn't expected. So you've started our year opening doors for all of us and bringing us into balance, but also energizing us, enthusing us. So thank you so, so much for joining us today.